Okay, so what were some of the results of the American Revolution? So the American Revolution, of course, is that time period with the protests and the boycotts when the American colonists were not happy with the British government and were fighting for their independence, fighting for their own freedom. After about 7.5 years of war and battle, both physically, financially, politically, the American colonists won and forced the British government to surrender and sign a peace treaty known as the Treaty of Paris in 1783. So now they have their independence, and there's some good and some bad that comes with independence. And like I was telling you in class, think about it in your own life. You probably thought it would be cool to be independent, be out on my own. There's some positives, there's some negatives. So, first of all, the biggest positive was independence. It was the freedom, it was the liberty that they were fighting for. The reason that they were spending time, money, and lives, losing lives, was because they wanted to be able to govern themselves freely. And now they could. Now, there's a big hypocrisy in there because these colonists, these Americans, were saying it's wrong for the British government to tell us what to think, what to do, tell us things that we can't do. They don't give us a say. They're not treating us like human beings. They're treating us like children. And the British citizens were calling these American colonists crybabies and whiners. But meanwhile, all this is going on, slavery is still in existence in America. So think about how much of a double standard it is. On one hand, to say, don't tell me what to do, don't treat me like I'm not human, but then they still had slavery, that institution that dehumanized African American slaves and other slaves, and even unwealthy people and immigrants and Native Americans. So that's a benefit, okay? A big negative of the American Revolution, or a big negative about the war, is the fact that there's war debts that need to be paid off, okay? So this negatively affected the colonial economy. Not only did they have to spend a lot of money on war, now they got to pay it back, but they kind of hurt their trade with the British government. So England was their best customer, their best paying customer. And now, when you upset your customer, they're not going to do business with you. And if it's a customer or if it's a group that shells a lot of money into your economy, that puts you in a little bit of an economic depression. So that was a negative. Okay, so they're in debt. Another result was the adoption or the writing of state constitutions and state governments. Okay, so this new government, this new federal government in America, did not want to repeat what was going on over in England. They did not want another tyranny. So they basically said, we're going to create this government, but it's really just to kind of organize the country. We don't want to be in charge of you. You do your own thing. So these states, each state's like Virginia, Maryland, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, all the 13 colonies that will be on our state map quiz coming up, they had to write their own state constitutions, their own set of rules and laws. Okay, so that's what a constitution is. It's this document that sets out the laws and principles of a government. It basically tells the people what they can and cannot do. And the federal government was very limited and very weak at the time because they said, we don't want to have a lot of power. We're going to let you decide. We're going to have you do that. Now, the problem with that, even though it spells out individual rights and it kind of grants people certain liberties and freedoms, and it also sets limits on governmental power, what happens when there is a division of power? What happens when two different groups within a state have a disagreement? Who's going to step in and determine what's going on? Because notice that there's a legislative branch which makes the laws and an executive branch that enforces or carries out the laws, but there's no judiciary group. There's no set of people or precedents to say, this is how we're going to determine who actually broke the law and who didn't, who's right and who's not right. Now, the main result, the main consequence, the biggest benefit was the realization that they needed a strong but limited federal government. So you want a government that's strong enough to protect you and keep you safe and keep the people in order, but you don't want to have a government that's going to trample your freedoms and your rights and put too many limitations on you as a citizen. So there needs to be a happy medium. There has to be somewhere in the middle where government is strong enough to control and prevent chaos, but not overly strong to where the people fear their government and worry about their government and resent their government. Because that's typically when we get to revolution and revolt and chaos and sometimes violence and death. And a little history note here, Patriot success in the American Revolution later inspired other revolutions. And a revolution is basically when a group of people work proactively to try and bring about a change. And usually in the course of history, they're trying to change their government. And people like John Locke and Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration of Independence, said, if your government is doing wrong to you, you should do whatever you can to try and change that. Politically first, using your voice or your vote. But if it gets beyond that and you need to start to take things a little bit more seriously, then that's what they need to do. And we saw it in a very violent manner in France. So the French Revolution, where the people who were unhappy with the king and queen of France, they stormed their castle and killed them, cut their heads off. Latin America, there were also slave revolts, which ended up in people dying. We talked about some of the slave revolts that were starting to happen in America, and we're going to learn about more as we get into the 19th century. Guys like Nat Turner, abolitionists like John Brown, who basically come in and try and use violence to threaten and scare those who were oppressing people and get them to change their ideas.